Good morning. The hearing will come to order. We have a vibrant committee here, and we are going to get going. Stephanie and I rule this place, but we'll have some folks kind of come in and out. Here we go, and we're very excited about this hearing. So, with that, I'll give you a little bit of how this works, and then I'll get into my statement and get Ms. Murphy into her statement, and we'll kind of get this thing rolling really quickly. I'll do it a little backwards this time. The rules are we go down the row, and you have 5 minutes to have your opening statement. You'll see the lights, they'll come on, and they'll be green for 4 minutes and yellow for a minute. When it goes red, just try and wrap it up at some point. And then we'll kind of move quickly. Okay. Well, Congress has long established the need to maximize opportunities for small business. I believe a vibrant small business community is essential to our national security. Many of these businesses serve our country by working with the DOD to provide necessary goods and services to our men and women in uniform. One purpose of the Small Business Act is to ensure that we maintain a strong industrial base of small contractors ready to provide cost-effective solutions and cutting-edge innovation. Therefore, it is important that no part of the Small Business Act is ignored or undermined. Statutory provisions that are not observed can threaten the crucial benefits small business provide to our military. The subcommittee is grateful to the DOD Office of the Inspector General, or the DODIG, for its work in continuing to investigate the mismanagement of the small business subcontracting requirements. These reports provide documented proof of agency practices that are detrimentally impacting small contractors, subcontractors. Turning to the report at hand, the DODIG investigated small business subcontracting at 2 Army Contracting Command, or ACC, locations. The IG's report, issued on March 19, 2018, found that the ACC has inconsistently complied with statutory requirements requiring the administration of subcontracting plans. This failure resulted in denial of $915 million in small business subcontracting opportunities. Putting this number in context, the IG investigated 50 contracts for this report. Extrapolate that across the entire Army procurement system, and the damage to small business could be devastating. Furthermore, the IG found that the ACC may have missed opportunities to recoup liquidated damages potentially owed to the federal government and taxpayers up to $82.3 million. Perhaps most telling is the IG's finding that administering subcontracting plans is not a high priority at the ACC. This translates to less competition, higher prices, and could rob our warfighters of the newest innovation and best solutions that so often come from small businesses and startups. I understand this devastating report is merely a snapshot of one isolated piece of our defense contracting network. But I do hope that this conversation today will spur others to action. I can tell you in my office we work very, very closely with aerospace, with DOD, with subcontracting, and one of the biggest issues that we have is small subcontractors kind of getting into the system or being able to work in the system. We also know that small businesses are very agile, and especially with the DOD, if there's an issue with a system that our warfighters have, and there is a way that we can correct that quickly, we want to. And I'll leave with just this one story. I was out with a company just recently, and they were showing me their latest in robots that went out for bomb disposal. And they let me play with it, and they gave me the controller, and it was a Xbox controller. And I said, "Is this really the controller?" And they said, "No, but this works better." So we bought it for $29.99, and this is what we use. Now, obviously, that's probably not as good as the original controller, or it doesn't hold up that well. But it did kind of get me thinking of how we can be agile and how we can move quickly. And if a warfighter or someone on the ground, whether it be a ground pounder or someone in the air or at sea, is saying something, that we've got to be able to move quickly so that we can do those types of things. So With that, I will now yield to Ms. Murphy for her opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and also thank you for holding this important hearing. You know, small businesses continue to look for new opportunities to expand their ventures, especially by competing for contracts in the federal procurement marketplace. In fact, in fiscal year 2017, the federal government was involved in contracting actions worth over $508 billion, making it one of the largest buyers of goods and services in the world. Prime contracts are generally viewed as the most lucrative way for small businesses to participate in this marketplace. However, as contract bundling has become more prevalent, subcontracts have become more of a common entry point for small businesses to work with the federal government. Therefore, it's really critical that we ensure there's a level playing field for small firms as they pursue subcontracts. During today's hearing, we'll discuss the Department of Defense Inspector General's recent audit of 2 Army contracting command centers, one in Redstone, Alabama, and the other one in Warren, Michigan. I share Chairman Knight's concerns that the audit findings are troubling. The audit concluded that the preparation and enforcement of subcontracting plans must be improved to ensure that small businesses are not losing out on subcontracting opportunities that could be critical to strengthening their bottom line and supporting many jobs. Subcontracting plans serve as an important accountability mechanism, ensuring that prime contractors make a good faith effort to provide opportunities to small businesses. So it was really disappointing to learn that contracting officials at ACC Redstone and ACC Warren did not make certain that prime contractors provided small businesses with adequate subcontracting opportunities for 23 contracts valued at nearly $915 million, or nearly half of the contracts that the Inspector General had examined. In these cases, it seemed like there was a lack of knowledgeable contracting personnel and proper transition protocols, both of which are basic functions of a contracting office. With more than 22 million contracting actions each year, every federal agency should make proper review of subcontracting plans a top priority. I think this is particularly important in the case of the Department of Defense, which oversees the vast majority of government contracts. The audit also revealed that contracting officers at these ACCs lacked the proper training to successfully administer subcontracting plans. Furthermore, the IG's audit found that the ACC Redstone and ACC Warren may have neglected to follow up on reports showing that contractors were not meeting all of their small business goals. Overall, small businesses seem to have been an afterthought rather than a primary focus for these contracting offices. You know, I think encouraging more small business participation in the federal marketplace remains a priority for this committee, and subcontracting will continue to be a vital path for small businesses to obtain government contracts. So today we have an opportunity to examine what went wrong at these ACCs and how we can implement solutions to increase access to subcontracting opportunities for small businesses. I thank the witnesses for being here and look forward to your testimony as we delve into the audit findings and its recommendations. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. Okay, we will go to introductions. I would like to formally introduce our witnesses. Our first witness is Mr. Michael Rourke, the Assistant Inspector General for Readiness and Global Operations at the DOD. He has served with the Department of Defense Office of Inspector General since June of 2000 in various staff and leadership positions. Mr. Rourke testified before the subcommittee previously in 2016 on a similar audit undertaken by the Inspector General, and we welcome you back today. Our second witness is Mr. Tommy Marks, Director of Army Office of Small Business Programs. In this position, Mr. Marks serves as the Army's lead on small business policies, goals, and procedures, and represents the Army in interagency communications with the Small Business Administration and other federal agencies. And we welcome you here today, Mr. Marks. Our last witness is Ms. Tiffany Scroggs. Ms. Scroggs is the newly appointed president of the Association of Procurement Technical Assistance Centers. That's a mouthful. Having previously served as the regional director and vice president. Ms. Scroggs is also the program manager of the Washington State Procurement Technical Assistance Center and has been a member of the Washington PTAC since 2007 when she joined as a procurement counselor. We welcome you, Ms. Scroggs, today. Okay. Now we have the rules of the lights, and we are ready to go. So, Mr. Rourke, you are now recognized for 5 minutes for your opening comments.
Good morning, Chairman Knight and Ranking Member Murphy and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss our March 2018 audit report of Army Small Business Contracting. During the audit, we visited 2 Army Contracting Command, or ACC, contracting centers, ACC Redstone and ACC Warren. Our audit objective was to determine whether ACC Redstone and ACC Warren contracting officials took appropriate actions to ensure that prime contractors met their small business subcontracting goals. We reviewed a sample of 50 contracts valued at approximately $1.6 billion of 216 contracts valued at approximately $7.6 billion that ACC Redstone and ACC Warren awarded to other than small businesses with estimated completion dates in fiscal years 2015 and 2016. Overall, ACC Redstone and ACC Warren generally provided small businesses with the opportunity to compete for prime contracts. However, contracting officials did not ensure that prime contractors provided small businesses with adequate subcontracting opportunities. Specifically, ACC Redstone and ACC Warren contracting officials ensured that prime contractors provided small businesses with adequate subcontracting opportunities for 27 of the 50 contracts we reviewed. However, contracting officials did not ensure that prime contractors provided small businesses with adequate subcontracting opportunities for 23 contracts valued at approximately $915 million of 50 contracts we reviewed valued at $1.6 billion. Specifically, ACC Redstone and ACC Warren contracting officials awarded 6 contracts without a subcontracting plan or a determination that no subcontracting possibilities existed, did not monitor prime contractors' compliance with individual subcontracting plans for 11 contracts, did not determine why prime contractors with individual subcontracting plans did not meet their small business subcontracting goals for 5 contracts, and accepted an individual subcontracting report for 1 contract which may have misreported subcontracting goals. Each of these items is required by the Federal Acquisition Regulation, or FAR, subpart 19.7. These problems occurred due to 3 primary causes. First, ACC Redstone and ACC Warren contracting officials stated that some contracting personnel did not understand subcontracting plan requirements. For example, ACC Redstone did not provide adequate training or procedures for administering subcontracting plans. Second, ACC Redstone and ACC Warren contracting officials noted that administering subcontracting plans was often not a high priority. Third, guidance at both commands did not address the transfer of subcontracting plan administration duties as required by the FAR when a contract is assigned to a new contracting officer. We made a total of 8 recommendations to ACC Redstone and ACC Warren and the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Procurement to improve small business contracting procedures. Specifically, we made 2 recommendations to ACC Redstone, and the command agreed with each recommendation and is in the process of taking corrective actions. In addition, we made 3 recommendations to ACC Warren, which command officials agreed with. During the audit, officials at ACC Warren took corrective actions, and we closed 2 of those recommendations. ACC Warren is now in the process of completing corrective actions on 1 other recommendation. Finally, we made 3 recommendations to the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Procurement. The Army agreed with each of these recommendations and is in the process of taking corrective actions. As a result, small businesses may not have received subcontract work that prime contractors for Army contracts were required by the FAR to make a good faith effort to provide. Contracting officials did not consistently obtain subcontracting reports or follow up on reports that showed that contractors were not meeting their small business goals. Therefore, ACC Redstone and ACC Warren may have missed opportunities to recoup liquidated damages of up to $82.3 million. This concludes my statement, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have for me.
Thank you, Mr. Rourke, and I'd like to welcome to our committee the chairman of the full committee, Chairman Shabbat. Thank you very much. Okay, and we will move forward to Mr. Marks. You now have 5 minutes for your opening statement.
Good morning, Chairman Knight, Ranking Member Murphy, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. I am Tommy Marks, the Director of the Army Small Business Programs. I first want to apologize for missing the subcommittee's suspense to provide a written statement, which was delivered yesterday. I misinterpreted the instructions. Secondly, thank you for this opportunity to testify before you today. I'm an Army veteran and a member of the Senior Executive Service of the Army. I've served as the director since April 2015. Prior to that, I served as the Army's Executive Director for Service Contracts Policy and the Army's Logistics Civil Augmentation Program, known to our soldiers as LOGCAP. I entered my 40th year of service to our nation on January 2018, serving as a soldier, government contractor, and civil servant, with over half of that time working in logistics, contracting, and the small business community. From April 2017 to January 2018, the Department of Defense Inspector General conducted a performance audit of contracts for small business subcontracting at the 2 Army contracting commands located in Redstone, Huntsville, Alabama, and in Warren, Michigan for the Warren Contracting Center. The Inspector General determined that the inconsistencies exist with actions of contracting officials ensuring that prime contractors met their small business subcontracting goals. The Army concurs with all the findings and recommendations. Recommendation number 3 addresses the responsibilities of the Office of Small Business in coordination with the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Procurement to train contracting and small business officials on subcontracting in accordance with the Federal Acquisition Regulation, Part 19.7, to revise the Army's Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement, Subpart 5119.7, to incorporate guidance on administering and transferring responsibility of subcontracting, between contracting officials, and to issue a policy alert notifying contracting and small business officials when the revision is completed. We have started the training as of December 2017. To date, we've trained 193 personnel, and we're coordinating with our commands to complete a training schedule for the remainder of FY18. The revision is currently in staffing, which should be completed in about 60 days, and the training will also, guidance will go out 1 June. I owe back to Mr. O'Rourke that in writing, which will close out, hopefully, will close out the recommendation. Finally, I want the subcommittee to know that the Army is a staunch supporter of small businesses, which is an enabler for Army readiness and a key component to our industrial base. Chairman Knight, I also want to share that my first invitation by Congress came from your district, California 25, a small business forum with a local PTAC, the Procurement Technical Assistance Center, and the Chamber of Commerce of Santa Clarita in August of 2017. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. And now, Ms. Scruggs, you have 5 minutes for your opening.
Chairman Knight, Ranking Member Murphy, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, as well as Chairman Shabbat, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Tiffany Scruggs. I'm the Program Manager of the Washington State Procurement Technical Assistance Center and President of the Procurement Technical Assistance Centers, known as APTAC. We're the professional organization of the 95 PTACs nationwide. As you may know, the PTAC program was created by Congress in 1985 to help small businesses compete for federal, state, and local contracts and subcontracts. We're funded in part through a cooperative agreement with the Defense Logistics Agency. Last year, PTACs helped over 48,000 small businesses win and fulfill government contracts and subcontracts valued at over $20 billion. PTACs are deeply engaged with subcontracting issues. Not only do we help small businesses identify subcontracting opportunities, we're often contacted by large primes for assistance in developing their subcontracting plans and locating small businesses that can satisfy their unique requirements. My testimony today reflects input from some of the most experienced procurement professionals across the country. I'm privileged to share their insights and hope that they will support your efforts to improve opportunities for our nation's small business contractors. We find that small businesses bring to the marketplace innovation, agility, and additional competition that results in better products and services at lower cost. This enhances our nation's supply chain. Furthermore, limited access to subcontracts reduces the number and capability of small business contractors that can qualify to enter the acquisition pipeline. As you know, subcontracting is the most realistic entry point for many small businesses seeking to supply to the government. Congress and units of government can affirm that a robust small business participation in the supply chain is a priority by focusing on 4 elements: education, oversight, transparency, and incentives. Each of these are explored in detail in my written testimony, and today I'll share insights for a few. I'll conclude my remarks with additional information as to how PTACs across the country can assist in the effort. First, education, ensuring that not only agency acquisition staff, but prime contractors understand the regulations with regard to subcontracting goals, plans, and reporting. This will go a long way towards remedying situations such as those identified in the IG's report. Related to oversight and internal controls, we believe that a primary factor in agency subcontracting failures is generally an unrealistic over-reliance on under-resourced contracting officers to faithfully enforce FAR Subpart 19.7. I've listed several suggested remedies in my written testimony, and among them is to increase the number of SBA procurement center representatives and commercial market representatives. On the topic of transparency, one of the biggest barriers to small business access to subcontracts is lack of information about the opportunities. Unlike agency solicitations, which are posted on fbo.gov, there's no centralized listing for subcontracting opportunities or a mechanism for identifying and connecting with potential buyers. Suggestions include establishing a public platform similar to FBO where subcontracting opportunities can be posted. While SBA's subnet could theoretically be used for this purposes, currently it lacks critical amounts of usage and is difficult to navigate. Transparency is not only a powerful motivator for compliance, but it expands the ability of other interested parties to help support enforcement. Amongst the suggestions is to make subcontracting plan information publicly available upon award to allow small business contractors to participate in policing the compliance of prime contractors. However you choose to implement enhancements to the subcontracting plan compliance, please remember this. PTACs play an important role in supporting subcontracting. We train small businesses to be procurement ready, and we regularly work with prime contractors who come to us for help with small business outreach and subcontract plan development. Despite our active involvement with small businesses, far too few prime contractors work with PTACs, and PTACs are hampered by the same lack of transparency that limit our small business clients. The value of PTACs was as an essential bridge between small business contractors and DOD was highlighted this year earlier in a report of the Advisory Panel on Streamlining and Codifying Acquisition Regulations known as the Section 809 panel. The 809 panel identified PTAC program as the only DOD-wide program to conduct outreach to bring small businesses into the defense market. The report recommended a number of provisions that would expand our capacity, resulting in our ability to further support a prime contracts effort to connect with small businesses. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify and for your support of the PTAC program nationwide. I hope that our input today has been helpful, and we stand ready to help the committee any way that we can.
Okay, very good. And we will go through a round of questions and see how this works out. I appreciate the witnesses coming in today and testifying. So I'll kind of go through a couple questions and kind of go down the road. Mr. Rourke, give me an idea of the most impactful recommendations you made and how best we can address the deficiencies.
In our Army report, which we issued in March of 2018, we made a total of 8 recommendations. They're really broke down into 3 categories. The first category was determining whether liquidated damages were appropriate, and so we made a series of 5 recommendations to ACC Redstone and ACC Warren, and those really had 2 categories. First, working with contractors to make sure that the individual subcontracting reports were in the system so that contracting officers could make a determination about whether they met their good faith efforts. And so we had 3 recommendations, 1 for Redstone and 2 for ACC Warren on that category.
So, and I don't mean to cut you off, Mr. Rourke, and I understand from your testimony, but how are we going to track this? How are we going to track that it's been done? It seems like the Army is very, very willing to accept these and to move forward and kind of correct the deficiencies, but how are we going to track these and make sure this happens?
Well, all reports that we issue go into a follow-up process where we follow up on the recommendations to make sure that they were implemented. And so in 2 of the cases, the Army ACC Warren actually made corrective actions on the recommendations during our audit, and we were able to verify that they carried out on those actions. For the other recommendations, other than the liquidated damages recommendations, we also had 2 on policies and procedures to the Army level and 1 on training, as Mr. Marks stated in his opening statement. And in those cases, the Army agreed, and we continue to follow up with each of the organizations over the next few months to ensure that those recommendations were implemented. And so we'll continue to gather documentation and conduct interviews as necessary to verify that that was done.
Okay, and this is a little bit off, but this is 2 places that we did the audit. Do we believe that there is a systemic problem, or do we believe that this is something that might be in other services? Or can you make that determination by your audit?
So this audit on the Army that we just issued about 2 months ago was really the 5th that we've done in the last 3 years since 2015. So over that time, we've done 5 different audits, 2 on the Marine Corps, 1 on the Air Force, and 1 on the Army. And then there was also another report that was more or less like a follow-up audit. So I think that from those 5 reports, we have identified trends. And for example, the consistent challenges that the contracting officials face is monitoring prime contractors' compliance with individual subcontracting plans and determining why prime contractors with individual subcontracting plans did not meet their small business subcontracting goals.
Okay, and Mr. Marks, give me an idea of what the priorities of the Army is. Subcontracting a high priority? Is view of subcontracting in the small business, how it kind of works in with prime contractors? Is this a high priority?
Sir, I would tell you that we haven't done what we needed to do, but going forward, it's definitely going to be a priority. We focus on, as the ranking member stated in her statement, the prime contract side of the house. We do very well. We do subcontracts. We put in our acquisition strategies language as we build in those requirements about subcontracting. So it's a matter of, from my standpoint, a matter of enforcement and compliance.
Okay, and I appreciate you in your statement of saying that you're very willing and you've already started to implement some of these new procedures to correct these actions. And it seems like from Mr. Rourke's statement that is in the works and that is already happening. Some of these have already happened during the audit, so that's a good thing. Sometimes we get folks that come in here and they just adamantly kind of keep pushing back, and that's really not what you want to hear when you get an audit that shows deficiencies. You really want to hear a willingness to come forward and correct, or else there'll probably be another audit.
Yes, sir, I totally agree with you. And based on what the ranking member said, it's basic contracting, really. I mean, it's a part of what any contracting officer should be doing. They love to award contracts. I mean, that's kind of the thrill. But the work really is in contract administration, and that's what this is about.
And understand that we look in this committee, we look at the subcontracting, we look at the small business aspect because, as I said, they are very agile, they are very able to do things that maybe the primes can't, or maybe the primes don't want to do just because it would cost them too much. It would be kind of outside their bandwidth at the time or something like that. So the small business can be able to go in there and look at that problem, fix that problem, and move forward. And that's why it's so important, especially with the DOD, especially with the way that we have these large, ultra-large contracts, and nobody really builds an airplane on their own anymore, or build a ship on their own. They have thousands of small contracting companies that help them, and so that's why we're always very, very adamant about making sure that is a high priority and making sure that we know that, and we want everyone to know that. Okay, and I'm going to move to Ms. Murphy for her first round of questions.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rourke, your audit found that DOD may have missed opportunities to recoup liquidated damages of up to $82.3 million. That's staggering. Why do you believe that the contracting officials neglected to follow up on reports that prime contractors were not making good faith efforts to comply with subcontracting goals when there was the potential to recoup that amount of money?
So in our report, we wrote several recommendations about why we, to correct some of those deficiencies. But I think that some of the factors that we talked about earlier are the case. As Mr. Marks said, that the focus is oftentimes on awarding contracts and not so much on the administration side of it. And so we feel that there's a training and a guidance piece that could correct that issue. Also, we observed a lot of high turnover among contracting officials, and so then what happens in that case is, an original contracting officer may have awarded the contract, but it passes off to a second or a third contracting officer, and so sometimes there's not good transition from one contracting officer to another, which again we think goes back to a training and a guidance solution there. And there's also a few other system issues with federal procurement data system that could be improved, but I think that the transferring files from one to another and the
So let me just
follow
ask
through is kind of the two major parts.
just as a follow-up, if that's the primary role of these contracting officers, approving, administering, why isn't this training already happening? Can you talk about what training they currently go through, and how do we make that fix?
So in our report, we tackled that exact issue. We took a look at the training that they were getting, we also took a look at some of the guidance that they were receiving, and what we found was that oftentimes the training that they were receiving would, kind of briefly get into some of these issues, but it didn't really cover it in a sufficient detail to really, cover some of the intricacies that are included in FAR 19.7. Also on the guidance side, oftentimes when you look at the guidance, it would refer to a specific issue just briefly, but it really didn't provide very detailed information to the contracting officer to use at a practical level to kind of determine what they should do in certain cases.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Scroggs, first let me just thank APTAC's help with our successful effort to get an amendment to last year's NDAA to provide PTACs with the clear authority to assist small businesses in getting SBIR and STTR contracts. I really appreciated that support.
Thank you. We're excited about that. Thank you. Yes.
Great. So my question is, large prime contractors are required to submit subcontracting plans for review prior to receiving an award. If the contracting officer finds them to be inadequate, he or she can decide to pull the contract. In practice, however, how often are contracts not awarded due to inadequate subcontracting plans?
That's data that I don't have. I can tell you that we get instances where the prime contractor will call us and say, the Army told me to call you. Or most recently, it was, I'm in final negotiations on this Navy effort, and the Navy told me to call you so that we could demonstrate good faith effort. So was this in relation to your individual subcontracting plan? And a lot of times it's just potentially the prime is not set up to handle the reporting. They don't understand the full clause, and so they read the clause for the first time and they're like, oh man, this is going to require some internal systems. And so we brainstorm with them kind of what we see as best practices. We train them on the subpart 19.7 and help them fully understand it. But in my limited experience, they always pass after we work with them, and they're sincere about working with us.
Great, thank you. And I'm just about out of time, so I'll yield back, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Evans, you are up for your opening comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask this question to the panel. If possible, can you speak to the experience of minority and women-owned firms in dealing with subcontracting plans? and if they face any unique challenges when navigating this complex process.
Yes, the PTAC has a strong ethic and mandate to do specific outreach to diverse firms, including women, minority, veterans, and hub zone firms, and we take that very seriously. One thing that we really wanted to make clear was that maximizing access to subcontracting opportunities is not the same as maximizing the dollars awarded, although that would be a result. We see that simply increasing the awards to the same set of businesses, which is kind of what happens now, it won't deliver the benefits that we're describing here today. We would like to see a prioritization of creating an open and vibrant opportunity so that the firms from many diverse backgrounds can have a true opportunity to get into the supply chain, maybe for the first time, or have an opportunity to compete where previously they did not. So the prime contractors kind of fit into three categories: those that take the goals very seriously and see the benefit behind them, those that kind of do it because they're required to and they might have limited capacity to take it more seriously than we'd like them to see, and then the third group who just simply doesn't care and maybe does it as an afterthought when they realize they haven't complied with their reporting. But those firms, the minority firms, the women-owned firms, the veteran-owned firms, certainly there is opportunity with the goal link to get their foot in the door, to put forth a good capabilities statement, and to kind of connect with the primes that way. So in that sense, the goals work, and the firms that are able to perform are usually able to make the case if there's a competitive opportunity in which to bid.
Mm-hmm.
So what we do is we track the four socioeconomic categories, which for the women-owned business, but we do not track it broken down to that level.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
For our audit, we on the Army, we focused on small businesses as a whole, and we didn't break it down into any further subcategories.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Ms. Scrub, go back to you. Can you think of any examples of success from women or minority contractors? If so, why the experience of that particular firms were different?
Repeat it again, why the firms were successful?
Can you think of any examples of success from women or minority contractors? And if so, why the experience of that particular firm was different?
Certainly, we have many examples of firms in the 8A program, the Small Business Development Program that the SBA monitors. We have firms that are in that program that see great benefit, and I'm working with one firm now that's likely to graduate a few months early as a result of exceeding the size standard for their industry code, which is kind of the whole purpose of the program. So the benefits to that, of course, are really strong in terms of prime contracts. But the prime contractors also take the small business, the disadvantaged business goal pretty seriously as well. And they were able to gain appropriate past performance through the 8A program that made them more competitive with the other primes. So, the 8A program is, I would put a feather in that cap as a success program, certainly helping firms compete.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're back to balance my time.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lawson, you are up for your questions.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member. One of the questions I had, Mr. Evan asked, and so I took care of it, and I thought was quite interesting the way you all responded. As I travel across this country and come in contact with small businesses all the time about subcontracting, one of the things they express a great deal is the anxiety that they have as subcontractors. When you talk to the prime blame it on the federal government, the paperwork, the requirements, and everything else that you can think of. So in your opinion, what is the number of challenges that small businesses are facing when they participate as a subcontractor, in this subcontract with opportunities, when they have all this anxiety? And it's just for the panel, and I don't know whether y'all see a lot of it, but when we are out in the field, this is what they speak to all the time. I had a small business roundtable in Jacksonville about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and this was brought up a great deal. And so I don't know how you get to the bottom line of it, and maybe some of you all can share some light on it.
So I would tell you that I have not heard it to the level that you have heard. We get inquiries to our office. I take capability briefs. I have open line to talk to contractors about small business contractors about any issue that they may have, so that we can help solve that. Don't have any data on what those anxieties are, but typically in the pay arena, we get those complaints, and if we get those, we run those to ground, because we know that if the prime, when we're paying the prime, they're supposed to do due diligence and pay their subcontractors, and those are some of the issues that sometimes come up, and we'll hold the primes to accountable.
Okay, and if I may, do you think some of the anxiety expressed because their relationship with the prime, those anxieties are there because they lose the contract, or the prime contractor go with someone else? And the reason why I ask that question is it appears that they don't have the bonding capacity to compete as a prime, and so they rely very heavily on the prime in order to do these contracts. But the anxiety level comes from the fact that they might even feel that they do a better job than the prime. You know, and so what I'm trying to say, from your experience, do you ever come in contact with any of that, where the subs are much more successful than the primes, but they have to rely on the primes because of the way it's set up in defense spending?
I would tell you that that's probably a true statement. I mean, we do a lot in the service arena, service contracts arena. When you look at contracts that are awarded, a number of teams that are put together are really with a prime and small businesses to do the work. But a lot of times the small businesses, as you stated, don't have the capacity to compete on their own in order to win the contract. So I would tell you, a number of them that I talk to, they would prefer to subcontract versus being a prime contractor because of our red tape, as they say. You know, a lot of stuff to do business with the Department of Defense, with the federal government, period. So.
And before my time run out, Mr. Roark, what can you all do to try to help alleviate those kind of concerns?
I think that you know, one of the benefits that has come out of our series of audits has been taking a look across the services to determine whether prime contractors are being held accountable for living up to their subcontractor goals that they said that they would do at the time of award. And I think that it's important to review whether contracting officers and contracting officials are actually following up on that throughout the contract to see if they're actually meeting the goals that they said that they would. So I think that looking across the services to ensure that the primes are being held accountable and that contracting officials are reviewing their progress is important.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, can I have one more shot at it? How often do y'all evaluate the prime contractors? Is it done on a yearly basis, a quarterly basis? How often is it done? Can anyone speak to that? And if I'm not clear, what I mean is how they are performing in conjunction with their subcontractors.
So I think as the audit showed, we're not doing what we should be doing. When we establish those subcontracting goals with a prime contractor, and they put that on the table, and what we're not doing well today is it's really compliance, because we've already got the verbiage in our regulations. You talk about liquidated damages, you're supposed to develop that before the contract award, where the two of us know what that is, and as his audit shows, that's not being done. So until we really enforce, and I think we have the tools, it's holding folks accountable. You got to do the enforcement and hold them accountable.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. And just a couple follow-ups. Mrs. Scroggs, have you noticed any difference in military versus civilian agency adherence to Small Business Act subcontracting requirements?
No, we find that the IG's findings related to the Army are consistent across all agencies, regardless of military or civilian.
Yeah, so that, you know, obviously that's a problem for us. We're very much about subcontracting small business being able to work in the system, to be able to do some of those things in the system that we just don't see primes stepping up and doing, or primes not wanting to do. So I know I've repeated myself a couple times on this, but it's pretty important. So, Mr. Marks and Mr. Rourke, we're going to ask one thing of you. In the next 4 to 6 months, we want to follow up to this committee on how things are going from the adherence of the recommendations, and Mr. Marks, on what you're doing to make these deficiencies not there anymore. How you're correcting them, what's going on, what is the new policies, the new procedures. So, and I'm a very kind of put a point on it. That's November 17th, is 6 months. If you come back earlier, you get credit in the committee. There you go. So we would like to have that, and we'd like to have a good relationship with the committee, that we're working on the things that we think are very important. We think that the community thinks are very important, and that's how it happens with a good working relationship. So if we can commit to that, then we are good to go. Are there any further questions from the committee? Okay, I think we've done our work, and this committee, let's see, I always end before I'm supposed to say what I'm saying. Okay. I ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days to submit statements and supporting materials for the record. Without objection, so ordered, and this hearing is now adjourned.